The elevator doors of Davenport Innovations slid open with a soft chime, revealing a woman in tailored navy silk and 4-inch Louboutins that barely made a sound on the marble floors. Annabelle Davenport didn't need noise to make an entrance. She was the entrance. Her presence demanded attention not because she asked for it, but because silence followed wherever she went, as though the world instinctively paused to listen. She nodded once to her assistant, then stepped into her glass-walled office overlooking the Skyliner city she helped shape, brick by algorithm. Behind her was the photo the world knew, Richard, and Annabelle at a tech gala 10 years ago, champagne in hand, smiles radiant, the golden couple. The caption under the frame read, "Together we build tomorrow." Only now Annabelle could barely look at it. It had begun quietly, like all betrayals do. A faint trace of something unfamiliar. A scent. Richard's jacket lay folded over the couch one late evening. She hadn't meant to pick it up, but instinct or intuition, sharpened by a lifetime in boardrooms, pulled her toward it. Lavia Estbel. Not hers. She wore Baccarat Rouge 540. Bold, distinct. Her signature. But this scent clung to the fabric like fingerprints on glass. Subtle, floral, smug. It wasn't the kind of perfume one accidentally brushed against. It was the kind that lingered when someone pressed too close. She said nothing that night. Richard had mumbled something about paperwork and exhaustion. His laptop was open, a few spreadsheets up. He even sighed the way he did when pretending to work. But his tie was too loose, his cufflinks mismatched. Annabelle noticed everything days later. She asked casually about his upcoming schedule. "Nothing unusual," Richard said, without looking up. "Just internal meetings. Might need to spend the night at the office, midweek queue, for planning's a mess." She nodded. No questions. No accusations. But that week, she reviewed the company's expense logs, something Richard had insisted on managing for years. "Let me handle it," he once said. "Too many petty invoices. Waste of your time." He was wrong. It wasn't a waste. She spotted it instantly. 4 Seasons Hotel. 2 nights, San Francisco. Their company had no ties there. No events, no meetings. And Richard, he had told her he'd be in the office, remember? That's when the rage didn't come. Instead, something colder did. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply made a call to security, then to it, and then to her private investigator. 3 days later, her phone buzzed. From L's security subject, requested footage, 27th floor, conference room. She clicked there. In grainy, black and white footage was Richard and Chloe. Annabelle stared, not because she was surprised, but because she finally knew. Chloe Sterling. She had seen something in that girl 5 years ago, spark of ambition, a mind quick enough to keep up with her own. She'd taken her under her wing, taught her everything she knew about market positioning, global strategy, and internal politics, elevated her to head of global marketing before she was 30. Annabelle had seen herself in her, but Chloe had seen opportunity in Annabelle's shadow. That night, in their penthouse, Richard poured them each a glass of Barolo and tried to talk about vacation homes in Santorini. Annabelle listened, smiled, even laughed at the right moments. And then she asked, with curious innocence, "Did you see Chloe today?" Richard paused. Just long enough. No, not today. Why? Just wondered. She's been awfully busy lately. He nodded. Well, she's brilliant. You were right. About her. that made her smile. I was right about her, she thought, and you're about to find out just how right I can be. The next day, Annabelle arrived at the office before sunrise. She didn't sit at her desk. She stood by the window and watched the sun slowly rise behind the skyline. This was her kingdom, her algorithms, her funding model, her legal architecture, her acquisition map, her code buried under layers of software. Richard had never even learned to pronounce. He was just the face, but she was the empire, and now the Empress was awake. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She needed patience. She needed leverage. By noon, she was already speaking to legal counsel. Quietly, efficiently, there were closetines. Richard never bothered reading when he signed corporate documents she had written. There was one in particular, Clause 27B, a technicality no one remembered except her. She created it, and in time, she would wield it like a blade. Later that week, she stepped into the elevator with KHLOE. They stood side by side, their reflections mirrored in the metal doors. Chloe smiled sweetly. Rough week. Annabelle tilted her head. Not at all. I've actually had clarity. Oh, I was just thinking, Annabelle said softly, how easy it is to confuse kindness for softness. But you know the funny thing about softness? Chloe glanced sideways, wary. It's often covering something sharp underneath. The elevator doors opened. Annabelle stepped out without another word. In the days following the elevator ride, Chloe Sterling's smile became sharper. Not smug but something just close enough to it to spark suspicion in those who paid attention. Fortunately for her, few did. Annabelle Davenport, however, noticed everything. The world still spun as if nothing had changed. Stock prices rose. Articles ran in Forbes and Wired about Richard's visionary leadership. At a charity gala, the couple dazzled against the Golden King and his elegant queen. Flashbulbs captured their linked hands, their coordinated smiles, but inside Annabelle's head, blueprints were unfolding. She had moved beyond heartbreak. That feeling had passed through her, quickly burned up like tissue in a furnace. What remained was calculation, cool and unstoppable. The kind of thinking that had made her a billionaire before 40. Chloe, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware that the air around her was beginning to tighten. It began subtly. A memo went out, restructuring internal reporting line. Standard, except now, all of Chloe's approvals required dual sign. One from the CFO, one from Annabelle. Chloe didn't dare protest, not openly. But her bright red lipstick that day was bolder than usual. And at the board meeting later that week, she dropped her voice half an octave lower when speaking. Performative. Confidence. Annabelle had taught her that trick. She smiled politely. Chloe, excellent point on the rebranding initiative. Though we'll need to hold off final approvals. Legal found inconsistencies in the asset register. I've looped in compliance. Chloe blinked. Just once. A perfectly normal response. Except Annabelle had said nothing about assets, which meant Chloe hadn't yet submitted them but had planned to, which meant she was already hiding something. That night, in the private residence, Richard came home late again. She sat by the fireplace, silk robe wrapped loosely, glass of dark wine in hand, her expression unreadable. He kissed her cheek. You're up late, so are you. Long dinner with the Asia team time zone nightmare. He pulled off his tie with a sigh. Let's go away next month, just you and me. Annabelle tilted her head. You mean like San Francisco? He froze for less than a second. What? I just remembered. Didn't you mention a strategy off-site there last quarter? Oh, yeah. God, that feels like forever ago. Time blurs, doesn't it? She said softly, smiling into her wine, like hotel mirrors. Everything looks better in reflections. Richard chuckled, poetic tonight. She reached over and touched his cheek. I've always been that. You just forgot. Back at Davenport Innovations, Annabelle. Legal team began their quiet excavation. They dug into Richard's expense records, not just for infidelity, but for patterns. Off the books, dinners, unapproved travel, ghost consultancy fees, and then came something interesting. A recently incorporated startup called Sterltech. Founder Chloe Sterling. Funding undisclosed. Scope, digital media optimization, AI eerily similar to one of Davenport's shelved patents. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was theft. Annabelle now knew Richard hadn't just cheated with Chloe, he'd promised her an empire of her own, probably whispered to her how Annabelle's time is fading, how she's brilliant, but old school, how we could do this without her. And that was when Annabelle decided they wouldn't be fired. No, that was too clean, too sudden. She was going to let them climb just high enough, and then she'd pull the floor out from beneath them to begin. She invited Chloe to lunch. It was the kind of gesture expected from a mentor and olive branch. Let's clear the air gesture between two strong women navigating a male world. They met at a discreet garden restaurant in a courtyard no press could access. Annabelle arrived 10 minutes early. When Chloe entered, she was dressed to impress, power heels, designer bag, and a white blouse just daring enough to command attention. Annabelle, she said, smiling, this is a surprise. Annabelle returned the smile. I figured we needed a woman's woman talk. Chloe looked cautious, but flattered, of course. They ordered. Small talk followed campaign performance, investor sentiment, quarterly projections. Then Annabelle leaned forward and said softly, I once thought you were the future of this company. Chloe's smile twitched. Thank you. That means a lot. I mean it, Annabelle continued. You reminded me of myself, years ago, but faster, hungrier. I always admired that. Chloe's shoulders relaxed. She was winning. Annabelle's eyes gleamed. But you made one mistake. A beat of silence. You confused ambition with entitlement. Chloe's brows furrowed. I mentored you, Annabelle said, voice still calm. I protected you. Opened doors that were sealed shut for women like us. And you walked through them with my husband. Chloe's mouth opened. Annabelle held up a hand. This is not a confrontation, Chloe. This is a courtesy. You still have time to step away. Chloe straightened. You can't stop us. There it was, the moment. Annabelle smiled. A slow, serene smile. I'm not stopping anything. I'm watching and waiting. Because when the storm hits will I want you to remember one thing. Chloe leaned in, defiant. What? That you were warned. Back at HQ, Annabelle sent an internal directive to the IP team. All unapproved tech proposals to be reviewed personally by CEO. She then scheduled a full audit of all third-party vendor contracts, especially those signed by Richard in the last 2 fiscal years. As the sun set that evening, Annabelle stood before the glass walls of her penthouse, watching the city glow. Behind her, Richard sat on the couch, laughing on a call with someone. Probably KHLOE. Let them laugh. For now, the Empress wasn't just planning a counterattack. She was writing their eulogy. At 2:14 a.m., long after Richard had fallen asleep beside her snoring gently, oblivious Annabelle opened her private Davenport terminal, encrypted, offline, air-gapped. She typed a keyword, Strawtech. The screen lit up with reports compiled by her internal audit team, incorporation documents, shell payments, trademark filings, and then there it was, a line of proprietary code used in one of Strawtech's demos that exactly matched a Davenport algorithm, still protected under dormant patent IP 0897 and proof. But instead of fury, Annabelle felt clarity, the kind that arrived not with noise, but with silence, precise, surgical, final. It was time to activate Clause 7B. Clause 7B wasn't part of any public corporate document. It was buried in the founder's agreement, signed in the earliest days of Davenport Innovations, back when Annabelle and Richard had equal ownership and equal faith in each other. It stated, in the event of conduct constituting gross breach of trust or misuse of proprietary information by a founding member or their designee, the other founding member may, without prior notice, initiate a nullification protocol transferring voting rights, stock privileges, and executive authority pending legal review. Annabelle had inserted it as a safeguard. Richard had barely read it. Now it would become the trapdoor. At dawn, she called a private meeting with her legal team. No leaks, she warned. I want the paperwork airtight before we move. By midday, she had filed the necessary internal notices. The board would be briefed in 48 hours. Richard, per Clause 27B, would only find out once it was done. And Chloe, she'd find out with the rest of the world. Meanwhile, Richard had no idea the floor beneath him was crumbling. He sat in his corner office, sipping a single malt and preparing for a press roundtable. His assistant brought in notes. Chloe texted him playful gifs. He basked in the glow of false security. Then his assistant returned. Legal flagged something. You've been removed from all signature authorizations. Effective immediately. Richard frowned. That's impossible. I'm coup. She handed him the memo. Executive nullification initiated. Clause 27B. The blood drained from his face. He stormed into Annabelle's office. You went behind my back. She didn't even look up from her screen. Sit down. No, you're not doing this. You can't. I already have. He paced like a man cornered. This is insane. You're blowing up everything we built because of what? Jealousy. Annabelle finally looked at him. Her voice was soft, almost pitying. Jealousy is what little girls feel. What I feel, Richard, is strategy. You think you'll get away with this? I'm the public face. You're the mascot, she said coolly. I'm the architecture. He laughed bitterly. Chloe and I are launching a competitor. You think this scares me, oh Richard? She stood and walked to the glass window behind her. You don't have a competitor, he sneered. Really, she turned. Strawtech has been served with a cease and desist. Your funding has been frozen pending investigation. Your code matches my patent. You bugged us. I built you, Richard. I don't need to bug what I already own. Chloe got the news next. One moment, she was leading a marketing summit. The next, security escorted her from the premises. Her access was revoked. Her name scrubbed from company databases. Her email terminated with a single-line auto-response. This account no longer exists. She called Richard in a panic. He didn't answer. Then she called her lawyer, and That's when she realized the patent she'd stolen was under Annabelle's name, alone, filed 2 weeks before Davenport Innovations was even formed. She didn't just lose her job. She'd committed corporate espionage. That evening, Annabelle met with the board. They were already briefed, silent, watching. She stood at the head of the long marble table, composed, immaculate in deep navy. "Silk, gentlemen," she began, "there's been a breach not just of policy, but of principle." She handed each board member a dossier. "Inside, you'll find proof of intellectual theft, conspiracy to defraud, and willful misconduct by 2 individuals, one of whom held an executive title under false pretense." A pause. "The nullification clause has been activated. My legal team has secured the company. There is no further threat." One board member asked, carefully, "What happens to Richard?" Annabelle's lips curved. Not into a smile, but something colder. "He's going to learn what happens when you mistake an empress for a footnote." Later that night, Annabelle walked through the now empty executive suite that had once belonged to her husband. She looked around. The sleek furnishings, the designer chairs, the shelves of curated books Richard never actually read. She touched the glass of the door gently, then turned out the lights. Behind her, the plaque was already being removed. The space was no longer his. Tools. The morning after Richard's removal made headlines. Chloe Sterling woke up to a sea of missed calls, unread messages, and one undeniable truth. She had gone from rising star to pariah. News outlets were feasting. Davenport coup ousted. An internal coup, alleged affair, patent theft, rock billion-dollar tech empire. Her name was plastered across digital screens in boardrooms and brunch tables alike. Some headlines were cruel, others clinical. None were sympathetic, and none had her side, until she gave it. By noon, Chloe had sent an email to Verve Weekly, a trendy, controversial loving media outlet hungry for clicks. The subject line read, "My truth, what really happened inside Davenport." Attached was a 2,400-word personal essay. It wasn't just damage control. It was a declaration of war. The piece went live at 4:37 p.m. The timing was strategic, just as markets closed, when readers were scrolling their feeds in the lull between work and wine. The title, "He Promised Me Power." She took everything. Chloe didn't name Annabelle directly. She didn't need to. She painted herself as a protege, turned scapegoat. A young woman caught in the crossfire of a power couple's implosion. She hinted at emotional manipulation, described coded messages from Richard during late-night meetings, and even alluded to pressures from Annabelle to stay loyal or be discarded. The article went viral in under 2 hours. Richard read the piece alone, in a penthouse he no longer owned. He wanted to rage at Chloe, at Annabelle, at the world. But more than anything, he wanted a win. Chloe had handed him a card, public sympathy. If they played this right, they could frame Annabelle as a cold, vengeful tyrant, a queen unfit to rule. But Annabelle was already ahead. By midnight, she released a simple, silent video on the official Davenport Innovations channel. No music, no drama, just her, seated at her desk. Her words were measured, deliberate. Loyalty is not a gift, it's a choice. And when people choose deception, they choose their consequences. She paused, looked directly into the camera. This company was not built on charisma or charm. It was built on innovation, integrity, and vision. We will not be derailed by sideshows or scandals. To those who remain, Let's get back to work. The video ended with the Davenport logo. It was viewed 12 million times in 24 hours. The markets responded. Her stocks surged 14%. Chloe's memoir backfired. Within days, corporate law analysts began dissecting the essay line by line, identifying subtle contradictions and potential self-incriminating statements. Former colleagues distanced themselves. Investors blacklisted her. Worse still, her NDA with Davenport Innovations, which she had broken by speaking publicly, triggered a lawsuit. Annabelle didn't just want silence. She wanted accountability. At the emergency hearing, Chloe sat behind her lawyers in trembling silence as Annabelle entered the courtroom, dressed in tailored black and pearls. Annabelle didn't even glance Chloe's way. The judge ruled quickly. Chloe would owe millions in penalties and damages. Her professional future was over. But the punishment was only just beginning. A week later, a discreet press leak revealed that Chloe had falsified data in a recent campaign pitch to investors, an action that could now open a fraud investigation. Suddenly, Chloe wasn't just the mistress. She was the liability. And Richard, he had stopped answering her calls. Back at Davenport HQ, Annabelle convened with her new executive team, loyalists, creatives, and visionaries who owed no allegiance to Richard. The meeting room was buzzing with possibilities. A rebrand, a new product line, an all-female leadership panel. Annabelle watched the energy build like a conductor commanding an orchestra. She was no longer just salvaging a legacy. She was reshaping it. That evening, as the city glowed beneath her balcony, Annabelle took a single glass of red wine and stepped into the night air. She looked down at the streets where she and Richard had once walked hand in hand, dreaming of changing the world. She had changed it. He had just borrowed the spotlight. And Chloe, she had gambled on a borrowed crown and lost. Annabelle whispered into the wind, "Never confuse grace for weakness." Then she raised her glass not in triumph, but in closure, because sometimes the true revenge wasn't destruction. It was surviving them, to be continued. Next episode. 5. The throne is hers in the series finale. Annabelle prepares for the biggest product launch in company history and finally confronts Richard one last time. Shall I continue with the final episode? Tools? The launch stage was immaculate. A minimalist glass platform rose beneath a vaulted ceiling of lights, pulsing softly in hues of silver and blue. Behind it, a monolithic screen displayed one word, Nova. It was Annabelle Davenport's magnum opus, a platform that would redefine adaptive AI in fintech and communication. Years in development, months in secrecy, and now, finally, minutes from unveiling. The press was everywhere. Tech insiders whispered. Investors held their breath. But backstage, Annabelle stood calm, not nervous, not eager, certain in the final weeks before the launch. She had orchestrated a full transformation of Davenport Innovations. Every contract Richard once handled had been negotiated. Every executive with a whisper of loyalty to the old regime replaced, a new board chairwoman appointed, strategic partnerships secured, and behind it all, the core of her victory, the Nova platform, built on her original code, one Richard had once dismissed as too sophisticated for market. He'd underestimated her vision. He always had. At 10 a.m. sharp, the house lights dimmed. Annabelle stepped into the spotlight. Cameras flashed. Innovation is born from silence, she began. From the quiet mind that sees what others dismiss. From the woman in the room no one listens to, until she builds the room herself. Her voice was soft but every word echoed. Today, we unveil Nova, a platform designed not just to solve problems, but to predict, prevent, and protect. The demo began. Live.flawless. The software read real-time market data, identified false signals, and suggested risk-mitigating strategies all in seconds. The crowd erupted. Nova wasn't a product, it was a revolution. Later that evening, as the company's valuation skyrocketed past projections, Annabelle returned to her penthouse. Waiting at the door was a letter, no envelope, just folded paper, hand-delivered. From Richard. The handwriting was rushed, unfamiliar, desperation etched between the lines. I know I was wrong. I never meant for it to go this far. I was lost, Annabelle. Without you, I'm nothing. We made something incredible. We can do it again. Please, just meet me. One chance, one dinner. She read it once, then again, then placed it gently into the fireplace and lit the match. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had peace. But fate wasn't done with Richard Davenport. Just a week after the launch, a federal audit initiated months earlier concluded its investigation. A whistleblower, formerly under Chloe Sterling, had come forward. Anonymous, but damning, evidence of offshore accounts, unauthorized fund redirections, and data misappropriation tied directly to Richard. Annabelle had known this day was coming. She had provided the whistleblower with legal counsel and through a third party when the arrest warrant was issued. Richard was already in hiding, but not for long. He was found at a rented estate in Monaco, alone, empty, powerless, KHLOE, now bankrupt and barred from executive roles for the foreseeable future. Issued a final social media post before deleting her accounts. The world isn't kind to ambitious women who choose the wrong men. Lesson learned. No one replied, not even Richard. Meanwhile, Annabelle's life didn't return to what it was. It evolved. Her board proposed a new title, founder and executive chair. She declined the CEO role not because she lacked the appetite, but because she was now building something beyond titles, a fund, a fellowship, an entire ecosystem of tech education for underrepresented girls worldwide. She was no longer just creating platforms. She was creating legacies. On the anniversary of Nova's launch, she returned to the old headquarters now, redesigned, renamed, the Davenport Center for Visionary Technology. An intern asked her that day, timidly, "How did you survive all that betrayal?" Annabelle smiled. "Because I built it all, and what you build, you can rebuild better." She turned toward the glass atrium, where her name now shimmered above the skyline. Besides, they burned down the castle. I rebuilt the kingdom.